The branch manager's words rang out like a hammer, striking directly into the minds of everyone in the lobby. "Get out! This place is not for people like you." Danielle Hayes, 38 years old, sat on the grey leather chair, her bright orange dress standing out against the cold atmosphere of the VIP client lounge, her gaze fixed straight ahead, showing no fear, no resistance. The air immediately thickened the heartbeat of every customer in the room, pounding like alarm drums. An elderly lady adorned in pearls murmured, "Did he just say that?" A young man in a black hoodie, hands trembling, as he held his phone, fingers hovering over the record button, felt the injustice radiate through every breath in the room. A young staff member at the counter widened his eyes, staring at Danielle's account screen, but said nothing. Richard Coleman, 45. The branch manager stepped forward, lightly touching her shoulder, as if asserting his absolute authority. His face wearing a mocking smile, eyes full of arrogance. "You think you can sit here dressed like that and demand millions of dollars? Not today." Danielle inhaled slowly, her hands resting calmly on her lap, her breathing steady. The bank lobby fell silent, as if the entire space were holding its breath, waiting for a move, a reaction, a strike to shatter the order. Heartbeat stretched, life slowed, every tick of the clock, every passing step became foreboding. A young employee glanced at Danielle silently, thinking she's too calm. Too calm. A customer near the espresso counter muttered, "I've seen that look before, someone holding back immense rage." Danielle remained seated, hands folded on her lap, her gaze unwavering, unyielding, yet her presence transformed the bank lobby into a silent arena, where every glance was scrutinized, where prejudice and power collided. Whispers began to spread. "She's not like the ordinary people here. Why are they treating her this way? This is completely wrong." Danielle recalled countless times she had been denied, looked down upon from banks to hotels, from airports to crucial meetings, always hearing the same words, "You don't belong here." But this time was different. This time she held the real power, the one they did not recognize, and her silence was a weapon. A few phones emerged, red lights blinking, capturing every moment. Every glance, every frown, every sigh from the customers became witnesses. Richard Coleman shouted, "You are causing chaos in the lobby." Danielle said nothing, simply locking eyes with him, her stare cold as stone, resolute and sharp. In that moment, everyone realized there was a difference. Some customers began whispering, a few nodded, others raised their phones to take pictures or record video. Tension reached its peak as security appeared, heavy footsteps on the marble floor, hands gripping her jacket, lightly pulling slightly. A woman shouted, "Don't touch her!" The young man in the hoodie exclaimed, voice shaking. "She's a client, not a criminal." Danielle remained calm, her hands resting on the chair, as if her presence could counteract the aggression. Every grab, every insult, every look of disdain was being recorded as evidence she had been waiting for. Danielle lifted her phone, activated the executive protocol call, and her assistant's voice rang out. "The board is standing by Ms. Hayes." Silence enveloped the room. Richard and the security guard's eyes shifted, a mixture of confusion and fear. Danielle lifted her chin, her gaze still composed, lips curving into a slight, quiet smile, radiating strength that the entire bank lobby could feel. The staff who had insulted her, the skeptical clients, and Richard Coleman himself all realized the truth. She was no ordinary client. She was Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital, preparing to invest $900 million into this bank. Every mocking smile, every contemptuous word, every act of oppression now meaningless. The bank lobby became a witness to a stunning reversal of power, where prejudice and narrow-mindedness were met with the silent force of a woman whose true authority no one had recognized. Every eye on Danielle, every sigh, every frown became proof, and in that moment the bank fell silent, leaving only an inviolable strength, a lesson in justice, patience, and the power of self each passing second, taut like a drawn bow. And everyone knew a storm was about to break. Danielle Hayes remained seated upright, her gaze never leaving Richard Coleman, even as the security guards tightened their grip on her jacket, a light pull meant to subdue a stranger. Every heartbeat in the bank lobby seemed to sync with hers, slow but commanding, making everyone around feel the invisible weight she carried. Young employee Evan Walsh, hands still trembling as he held his phone, recording the scene, silently marveled at her extraordinary calm in the face of insults and contemptuous behavior from the manager, while Bradley Moore, the man in the grey suit, stood frozen in confusion as he realized Danielle's unwavering gaze showed no sign of faltering. Customers around them, from Mrs. Linda Parsons to the young couple near the espresso counter, felt the tension spreading a subtle yet powerful disturbance, making them question whether the biases they had long accepted were truly fair. Every sigh, every glance at a phone, every frown became proof of the injustice slowly revealing itself. Danielle lifted her chin slightly, her presence resonating in the minds of those around. She was not afraid, not anxious, not resistant, for she knew real power did not lie in shouting or coercive gestures, but in self-control and the moment she had long prepared for. Every tug, every mocking comment fell into the invisible void she created, a silent strategic maneuver, causing Richard Coleman to gradually lose control. The space around her tightened. Like a drawn bow, phones emerged, red recording lights, blinking clients, secretly filming and whispering to each other about an unprecedented scene. Danielle breathed steadily, hands resting on her lap, each movement light, yet sharp as a blade, every calm glance capable of piercing any false veil of authority. Evan Walsh, still young, recognized he was witnessing a lesson in the power of patience, while Bradley Moore began to doubt the authority he had once deemed untouchable. Security officers Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, tasked with enforcing compliance, slowly realized something was amiss. Their eyes met briefly, knowing they were confronting not just a guest, but true power, and any forced action now held no meaning. The customers in the lobby began whispering, murmuring, some nodding subtly, others stealthily raising their phones to record, forming an unassailable record. Danielle lifted her hand, tapped her phone to activate the executive protocol, and her assistant's voice echoed clearly yet calmly. "Board is standing by Ms. Hayes." Silence fell, Richard Coleman's startled eyes flashing with unease as he realized the power shift that had taken place without his understanding. Danielle rose slowly, adjusting her bright orange dress, the light reflecting off the fabric like a steadfast flame in the bank lobby. She walked step by deliberate step, each movement radiating true authority, making every employee and customer realize the truth. This was no ordinary woman, but the CEO of Hayes Capital, preparing to invest $900 million into the bank. Richard Coleman furrowed his brow, his face tense, the mocking smiles from before now replaced with fear. Danielle scanned each staff member, each security guard, each observing customer, knowing that her silence had now become a verdict. A young employee, Emily Carter, exhaled shakily, recognizing the power she had never seen before. Evan Walsh continued recording, sensing history unfolding before his eyes. Customers gradually stepped back, their eyes a mix of fear and admiration, beginning to understand that true power does not come from title or artificial authority, but from the steadiness, composure, and insight of someone who knows who she is and what power she wields. Danielle tapped her phone lightly, ready to issue commands each passing second, taut as a bowstring. She looked directly at Richard Coleman, eyes sharp, yet calm, and in that moment, all his prior actions and words became meaningless. The bank lobby fell silent, only the tense breaths reflections of light on the cold marble floor, the leather chairs, and Danielle's radiant orange dress combined into a dramatic, vivid scene where justice and true power never before witnessed were slowly asserting themselves. Those around her realized they were witnesses, and in Danielle's eyes they saw the fusion of strength, intelligence, and determination of a woman who dared to challenge an entire system of prejudice. Each tense second passed footsteps, breathing the blinking of phones, all resonating with her silent power. Danielle lifted her phone, still gazing steadily at Richard Coleman, and once again her assistant's voice rang out. Document everything. Log all misconduct. The bank lobby fell silent, all eyes following every gesture, every breath, every moment, as true authority began to reveal itself. The employees who had mocked and doubted her now felt small, fearful, powerless before someone they didn't understand, and every customer in the lobby began to sense they were witnessing a historic moment, a lesson in justice, in the power of silence, in the ability to turn every act of discrimination into evidence to reverse the balance of power. Danielle Hayes, in her radiant orange dress, walked slow and deliberate steps, her gaze calm, yet commanding each step, affirming that she was not merely a woman in this story, but the storm to which every prejudice would have to yield. And everyone in the bank felt it deeply to the very core of their minds. Richard Coleman felt his heartbeat race wildly as Danielle Hayes sat upright, phone in hand, her eyes sharp and cutting through the air in the bank lobby. All the employees around went rigid. No one dared to breathe heavily. No one dared to challenge her, leaving only a thick, palpable tension that seemed almost tangible. Danielle pressed lightly on her phone, and her assistant's voice echoed clearly. "Activate board protocol, Ms. Hayes. Board is standing by." A shiver ran down Richard's spine as he realized that all his previous shouting, his domineering gestures, his contempt were now meaningless in the face of true authority. Customers from Mrs. Linda Parsons to the young couple near the espresso counter inched back, phones raised, red recording lights, blinking, realizing history was unfolding before their eyes, a lesson in fairness, in power, in the ability of a person to stand tall against prejudice and injustice without flinching. Danielle inhaled deeply, her gaze sweeping the entire bank lobby, the light from the ceiling reflecting off her bright orange dress, turning it into a flame of resolve amidst the cold marble, drawing every eye, rendering all prior acts of aggression meaningless. Security officers Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, who had just grabbed her sleeves to pull her aside, now stood frozen, feeling powerless, as they realized they were confronting true authority, that the woman they had assumed was an ordinary client now wielded the power to turn the tables. Evan Walsh, hands still trembling as he held his phone, tried to capture every moment, realizing that every second of Danielle's stillness, every breath was a tool far stronger than any shout. Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked mockingly, now looked at Danielle with bewilderment, unable to explain the mixture of fear and admiration he felt. Danielle remained upright, phone in hand, eyes locked on Richard Coleman, her voice calm, yet sharp. "You said I don't belong here. You called security, insulted me, challenged my authority. Now everything will change." She tapped her phone with precision, every gesture deliberate standard. And in an instant, the bank's system sounded alarms, staff access was locked, entry cards turned red, all artificial authority crumbling before her eyes. The employees who had once been arrogant, mocking, dismissive, now realized every action, every look, every word was being watched and recorded as evidence. Customers in the lobby, some exhaling nervously, some silently looking up, felt the weight of justice spreading as if the entire bank held its breath, awaiting the historic moment. Danielle lowered her phone slightly still, staring at Richard Coleman, demonstrating that she did not need to shout or raise her voice. Her presence alone sufficed. Richard's eyes showed worry, fear, all confidence vanished, realizing that everything he had considered power was now an illusion. Danielle spoke each word, measured sharp without yelling. "I am Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital. My company is about to invest $900 million into this bank. Every act of discrimination, every insult, every dismissive gesture will be documented, and those responsible will be held accountable." Silence spread through the lobby, everyone frozen, no one daring to breathe, for the authority she asserted was no longer theoretical. It was real, untouchable, and all who had belittled her now felt small and powerless. Danielle lifted her chin, scanning each employee, each guard, each customer. Every slow step and gesture weighted with significance, affirming that true power belonged to her, not to shouting, not to prejudice. Emily Carter, a 22-year-old intern, trembled, realizing she was witnessing a historic lesson. Evan Walsh, still shaking, knew each second of Danielle's silence was extraordinary power. Bradley Moore began to understand that her unwavering gaze had overturned the entire order he had once believed absolute. Danielle tapped her phone, and the assistant's voice rang out. "Suspend all individuals involved. All false authority, all control by staff security." And Richard Coleman collapsed immediately. Entry cards turned red. Access was blocked. The bank system recorded every action, every word. Customers stood still, some amazed, some admiring, realizing they were witnessing a moment where prejudice was challenged, where true justice and authority rose as Danielle Hayes, in her brilliant orange dress, walked deliberately calm, yet commanding, affirming that she was not merely the woman in the story, but the storm before which all bias must yield. And everyone in the lobby felt that power deeply in their minds. Every breath, every glance, every sigh of the customers became witnesses to this historic moment where justice, patience, and authority intertwined in a dramatic symphony. And Danielle not only triumphed over prejudice, but also created an inspiring, untouchable lesson that resonated in the minds of all who watched. The bank lobby suddenly descended into an uncontrollable chaos. Danielle Hayes, standing at the center of every gaze, her bright orange dress blazing like a flame that challenged all the false authority, present her eyes sharp as steel, making every employee and customer feel the overwhelming presence of her silent power. Richard Coleman, 45, the branch manager, tried to seize what little authority remained, but his hands trembled, his face, pale voice strained as he shouted, "You are causing a disturbance. You must leave immediately. Danielle did not flinch, did not respond. She simply pressed her phone, her eyes scanning every person, every action, every gesture, as if memorizing them all for the perfect indictment she would use to reverse the order. Customers around her, from Mrs. Linda Parsons to the young couple near the espresso counter, quietly raised their phones, red recording lights, blinking like candles in a silent cathedral, capturing every bare moment of prejudice, every contemptuous look, every insulting word, all becoming indisputable evidence. Evan Walsh, 27. The young employee, hands trembling as he held his phone, heart racing, realized that what was happening was not just a confrontation, but a historic lesson, a scene no witness would forget. Security officers Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, two strong men who had grabbed Danielle's sleeves to pull her out, now felt powerless, recognizing that their authority had been challenged, that they were facing a storm they could not control. And every forced action only made the injustice clearer to the witnesses. Bradley Moore, 42, who had mocked Danielle, stood frozen, unable to speak, eyes wide at her radiant orange dress and unwavering gaze, realizing that all previous prejudices and arrogance were now meaningless. Danielle inhaled deeply, every movement calm, yet commanding, emphasizing that she did not need to shout or yell her presence, and silent action alone enough to overturn the situation. She pressed her phone again, the assistant's voice echoing log all misconduct. Board is monitoring. Every prior action of staff security management, every discriminatory word was recorded, stored, and turned into evidence. Customers around those who still doubted now realized they were witnessing true authority justice rising. Danielle stood, stepping slowly, eyes locked on Richard Coleman, voice calm but sharp. "I am Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital. My company is about to invest $900 million into this bank. Every act of discrimination and insult will be addressed immediately." The lobby seemed to hold its breath, every gaze following her, every movement, every heartbeat, every unwavering glance, every surrounding sound fading into the background, leaving only complete focus on Danielle. Employees who had mocked her now felt their hands tremble, guilt and helplessness spreading as they realized every previous act had been recorded and would be acted upon. Security staff, customers all stood silently witnessing, feeling the silent power transform into absolute authority. Danielle lifted her phone, giving the order to her assistant: suspend all individuals involved. The bank system instantly flashed red access, blocked employee cards, deactivated all artificial authority of staff and management, collapsing within seconds. The heartbeat of everyone in the lobby seemed to synchronize with Danielle's deliberate steps, each stride calm, yet sharp as a blade, the light reflecting on her bright orange dress, turning it into a symbol of power and justice. Customers realized they were witnessing a historic moment where authority and justice were redefined through the strength of resolve, composure, and righteousness. Every sigh, every nervous glance, every phone raised to record became a witness to a complete reversal, where prejudice was overturned and Danielle Hayes' true power fully revealed. Everyone in the lobby felt the weight of the moment, the previously arrogant employees now small and powerless, while the customers recognized that justice could appear at any time and discriminatory actions would have consequences. Danielle lowered her phone slightly, eyes still on Richard Coleman, voice calm but strong. Everyone has witnessed this. Every action will be addressed. Justice is present. The bank lobby held its breath, every eye following her, and in that moment, The true power of a woman, daring to stand against prejudice and injustice, was confirmed. The strength of her silence becoming an unstoppable storm, spreading through the lobby, penetrating every thought and action, exposing every bias, collapsing all false authority, and establishing justice, leaving a deep impression on every witness, every pounding heartbeat, every wide-eyed gaze filled with awe and admiration. As Danielle Hayes stood in the center of the bank lobby, her gaze fixed on every employee, every security guard, every customer, the air stretched taut like a drawn bow, every sound from breathing to footsteps, heavy with tension, each passing second seeming to elongate endlessly, making Richard Coleman tremble, unsure how to act his false authority and arrogance, crumbling before Danielle's calm, yet absolute power. She slowly lifted her phone, activated the executive protocol, and her assistant's voice rang out decisively. "Board is standing by Ms. Hayes." A profound silence enveloped the lobby, every eye locked on her. Every word and gesture of the staff framed under Danielle's piercing gaze, every act of previous contempt now becoming undeniable evidence. Customers around her, from Mrs. Linda Parsons to the young couple near the espresso counter, dared not breathe, hands trembling as they held their phones, red recording lights flashing, realizing they were witnessing an unprecedented battle of power, where prejudice and arrogance confronted truth and justice. Evan Walsh is 27. The young employee felt his heart pounding and hands shaking as he realized that every breath Danielle took, every frown carried the weight of a stone, each movement dismantling false authority bit by bit. Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked at her, now stood silent, eyes wide in awe and fear, recognizing he had misjudged a woman whose true power no one had seen before. Danielle needed no shouting, no overt actions. Her eyes, her gestures, each deliberate breath, and the precision of her silence alone paralyzed the bank lobby. Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, the security officers, tasked with pulling her out, now stood frozen, realizing they faced a storm they could not control, fingers tightening on sleeves, faces tense, powerless against a power they could not comprehend. Danielle rose slowly, stepping with deliberate weight, the light reflecting off her bright orange dress, like a flame of unwavering resolve, turning her into a symbol of authority and justice, rendering all prior acts of disdain meaningless. She looked at Richard Coleman, her eyes sharp as steel, each word he had spoken now echoing as a testament to his failure and guilt. Danielle pressed her phone again, and the assistant's voice rang out, "Suspend all individuals involved." Immediately, all false authority of employees, security, and management collapsed. Access cards turned red, entry blocked, every act of disrespect and discrimination now recorded as evidence. Customers stood motionless, some trembling, some in awe, all realizing they were witnessing a historical storm of justice and true power. Danielle walked slowly, deliberately, eyes unwavering on Richard Coleman, emphasizing that true authority does not stem from shouting or artificial control, but from knowledge, patience, and the ability to seize the moment, from meticulous preparation to transform silence into extraordinary power. Every customer, every employee, every security officer could feel that they were facing an irresistible force, that all biases and wrongful acts would now have serious consequences. Danielle inhaled deeply, scanning the lobby. Every fearful glance, every sigh, every blinking phone became a witness to the power of truth, to the ability of a woman to stand against prejudice and injustice. The light reflecting off her dress transformed her into an untouchable symbol, where power and justice intertwined, exposing all prior wrongful actions of staff security and management, as Danielle prepared to step into the pinnacle of true authority. Customers, those who had doubted, now silent, realized they were witnessing a lesson unlike any other about fairness, about the power to change order, about the strength of silence and righteousness. Danielle lifted her phone once more, commanding confirmation of all violations, recording evidence, preparing the next steps. Every step, every gesture, every piercing glance, every controlled breath affirmed absolute authority. The bank lobby became a witness to a dramatic reversal of power, where prejudice was laid bare, false authority collapsed, and justice rose as Danielle Hayes, in her brilliant orange dress, moved like an unstoppable storm, turning every breath, every glance, every motion of those in the lobby into testimony of a historic moment where the power of truth, of fairness, of prepared authority exploded in dramatic fashion, inspiring and resonating deeply in the minds of all who witnessed. The bank lobby was steeped in an atmosphere of awe and fear. Danielle Hayes, standing tall eyes, scanning every employee, every customer, every security guard, each step she took marking absolute authority, causing Richard Coleman, 45, the branch manager, to lose all confidence. His face tense, voice faltering as he tried to shout, "You are causing a disturbance. You must leave immediately." Yet Danielle remained calm, her breathing steady, each movement deliberate and sharp, like an invisible sword slicing through the air, dissolving all false authority. Customers and staff, from Mrs. Linda Parsons to the young couple near the espresso counter, and even those observing from a distance, watched silently, every breath, every glance, realizing they were witnessing an unprecedented power struggle, where truth, justice, and the authority of a woman standing against prejudice erupted all at once. Evan Walsh, 27. The young employee, hands trembling as he held his phone, heart racing, felt every moment of tension each second. Danielle maintained her extraordinary silence, recognizing that her stillness was a weapon stronger than any shout. Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked mockingly at her, now stood frozen, eyes wide in astonishment and fear, realizing that all the authority they had trusted had been overturned. Danielle pressed her phone, and the assistant's voice rang out decisively, "Suspend all individuals involved." Ms. Hayes, and instantly all false authority of staff security, and Richard Coleman collapsed. Access cards turned red entry was blocked. The bank system recorded every act, every word, every prior act of contempt, now transformed into irrefutable evidence. The lobby fell into absolute silence, all eyes on Danielle, fully aware they were witnessing true authority, asserted through calm, meticulous preparation, and the power of truth. Danielle walked slowly, the light reflecting off her bright orange dress, transforming it into a symbol of power, justice, and resolve, rendering all prior discriminatory actions meaningless. Emily Carter, 22. The intern trembled, realizing she had just witnessed a historic lesson. Evan Walsh continued recording, noting how every breath and glance of Danielle became living evidence of the strength of resolve and justice. Bradley Moore began to understand that prejudice and false authority exist only until confronted by someone who stands tall, who acts decisively at the right moment. Danielle looked at Richard Coleman, eyes cold as steel, every prior insult echoing in the minds of all, now reverberating as a testament to failure and fear. She lifted her phone, ordering every act, every word, every gesture to be documented, turning every insult into actionable evidence. The staff who had mocked her, the security who had restrained her, all trembled, realizing they faced a power they had never comprehended, every eye following her, every action, feeling the rise of authority and justice. Customers fell silent, some trembling, some in admiration, understanding that true power does not come from title or shouting, but from preparation, patience, and self-control. Every step Danielle took, every piercing glance, every steady breath pressed every prejudice into the shadows of the lobby, exposing all arrogance and bias of Richard Coleman and his staff. Danielle pressed her phone once more, the assistant's voice resounding. Document everything. Log all misconduct. Every act, word, attitude, every movement of Richard Coleman. The security and employees was recorded, each piece of evidence, a slow but relentless pressure driving them to their limits. The bank lobby was so silent that the rapid breathing of those standing around could be heard. The light reflecting off Danielle's orange dress created a symbol of strength, authority, and justice. Danielle moved slowly, eyes fixed on Richard Coleman each step, asserting that she was not merely the woman sitting in the lobby, but a storm of power before which all prejudice must yield, and all discriminatory actions must be accounted for. Customers realized they were witnessing a historic moment where justice manifested vividly, where bias was exposed, and the true authority of Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital, was fully revealed, radiating throughout the bank, shaking every thought, emotion, and perception of the witnesses. Danielle lowered her phone, slightly, lips curving slightly, eyes still cold, every breath, every gesture, every step, affirming that justice and power need no shouting, no violent display, only calm determination, and the ability to seize the moment. And the entire bank felt it deeply from the heartbeat, the gaze to the mind of every witness, where authority, justice, and truth converged into an extraordinary storm, dramatic, inspiring, and unstoppable. Danielle Hayes stood in the center of the bank lobby, her eyes calm, yet piercing phone held firmly in her hand, each slow step marking absolute authority, every action of Richard Coleman, 45 the branch manager, seeming to yield completely to her presence. He trembled, trying to maintain a semblance of false confidence, but his prior shouting now sounded weak against Danielle's commanding presence. The light reflecting off her bright orange dress turned her into a vivid symbol of power, justice, and resolve. Every gaze fixed on her, every gesture and breath recorded each employee, every customer, every security guard feeling the weight of the moment. Danielle's silence was not absence, but a compelling force, an invisible power, making Richard Coleman and all the staff realize they faced a strength they had never encountered. Evan Walsh, 27 hands, trembling as he recorded on his phone, saw every breath, every glance, every movement of Danielle become indisputable evidence. Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked mockingly, now stood frozen eyes wide, a mixture of astonishment and confusion, recognizing that all prior prejudice and false authority had utterly collapsed. Danielle pressed her phone, the assistant's voice ringing out clearly. Suspend all individuals involved. Hayes, and instantly all artificial authority collapsed. Staff access cards turned red. Entry was blocked. The system recorded every offensive act, every discriminatory word holding all prior misdeeds of employees' security and management accountable. Customers fell silent, some trembling, some in admiration, realizing true authority had risen, justice exposed each glance, each breath, each movement, testifying to Danielle's extraordinary silence and power. Security officers Mark Dawson and Lewis Harper realized that their prior attempts to coerce only emphasized their smallness and helplessness. No one could resist the authority forged through her resolve, calm, and meticulous preparation. Danielle stood tall, moving step by deliberate step eyes, fixed on Richard Coleman, each stride affirming that true authority does not reside in title or shouting, but in self-control and the ability to seize the moment, all prior actions of staff, security, and management now serving as evidence for her to act upon. Customers recognized they were witnessing a storm of authority, spreading each heartbeat, each glance, each breath drawn into Danielle's power. Evan Walsh recorded every moment, every reaction of the staff, every sigh of the customers, realizing he was witnessing a battle of power, prejudice, and justice that no one would forget. Danielle inhaled deeply, scanning the entire lobby, each slow step, each measured breath, becoming proof of silent strength, authority, and justice. Every employee trembling, every guard bowing slightly, every customer lowering their gaze in awe, realizing that justice needs no shouting, no violent gestures, only determination, composure, and the ability to seize the moment. Danielle pressed her phone again, the assistant's voice resonating, "Document all misconduct. Log everything." The bank system responded instantly. Every wrongful act, every offensive word recorded, every false authority collapsed. Danielle walked slowly, the light reflecting off her orange dress like a steadfast flame in the bank lobby, transforming her into a living symbol of justice, authority, and the power of silence. Customers realized they were witnessing a historic moment where every prejudice was exposed, where the true authority of Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital, was fully revealed, radiating throughout the lobby, shaking the thoughts, emotions, and perceptions of all witnesses. Danielle lowered her phone slightly, lips curving subtly, eyes still cold, every breath, every gesture, every step, affirming that justice and power require no shouting, only calm resolve, and the ability to seize the moment. The entire bank felt it deeply, from every heartbeat, every gaze to the mind of every witness, where authority, justice, and truth converged into an extraordinary storm, dramatic, inspiring, and unstoppable. Danielle moved through the lobby, eyes steady and commanding, proving that she had not only triumphed over prejudice, but had established a new standard of authority, fairness, and the extraordinary power of silence in every moment witnessed. The bank lobby remained thick with suffocating tension as Danielle Hayes, 38, stood tall eyes locked on every employee, every security guard, every customer, her brilliant orange dress blazing like a proud flame in the cold space. Each step she took resonated like the drumbeat of authority, every measured breath compressed with power, causing Richard Coleman, 45, the branch manager, to tremble, face tense, struggling to maintain a semblance of authority while realizing that all his prior shouting was meaningless. Danielle pressed her phone, and her assistant's voice rang out decisively. "Freeze all transactions. Suspend all personnel involved." Instantly, all false authority collapsed. Access cards turned red. System privileges were blocked. Every act of discrimination, every offensive word recorded as evidence, and all staff who had once been arrogant became small, trembling, and powerless. Customers throughout the lobby fell silent, some shaking, some in awe, eyes wide as they realized they were witnessing a historic moment where prejudice was exposed, justice arose, and Danielle Hayes' true authority as CEO of Hayes Capital was asserted without compromise. Security officers Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, who had attempted to pull her aside, now stood motionless, feeling overwhelmed by her power, understanding they could not enforce control against the authority built from her resolve, composure, and meticulous preparation. Evan Walsh, 27 hands, shaking as he recorded every moment, heart racing, recognized that every breath, every glance, every gesture of Danielle became vivid proof of power and justice. Bradley Moore, 42, who had previously smirked at her, now stood frozen eyes wide in amazement and fear, realizing that all prior prejudice and false authority had utterly collapsed. Danielle inhaled deeply, her eyes sweeping the lobby, every prior action and word of staff and management now fully exposed, all surrounding sounds fading to nothing, leaving only her measured breath, each step, and unwavering gaze forcing silence, no one daring to move or resist. She walked slowly, deliberately, the light reflecting off her orange dress, transforming it into a symbol of power, justice, and extraordinary calm. Every gesture recorded, every customer sensing the weight and decisiveness of her authority. Those who had mocked or belittled her now trembled powerless before the authority they did not understand, realizing that every prejudice must be accounted for, every prior misdeed could not escape consequence. Danielle pressed her phone again, the assistant's voice ringing out, "Document all misconduct. Board is monitoring. Every employee, every guard, every prior wrongdoing was now evidence. All false authority entirely collapsed, and everyone in the lobby realized they were witnessing a permanent shift justice being enforced in real time. Customers stood silent, some trembling, some in admiration, understanding that true authority does not require shouting or violent action, only preparation, resolve, and the ability to seize the moment. Danielle lifted her phone, her voice calm, yet piercing, each word, each gesture, each glance, affirming that she was standing not just for herself, but establishing a new standard of fairness and authority. Every prior action of Richard Coleman, the staff and security, now served as evidence of failure before true power, and customers recognized they were witnessing a storm of authority, spreading every heartbeat, every glance, every breath, aligned with Danielle's extraordinary calm and power. She stepped deliberately, eyes never leaving Richard Coleman each step, affirming that true authority is not in title or shouting, but in preparation, steadfastness, self-control, and seizing the moment. The entire bank lobby became a witness to power, justice, and truth being revealed where every prejudice was exposed, every false authority collapsed, and Danielle Hayes' power radiated, making every employee, every customer, every security guard feel deeply that they were witnessing a historic moment where justice rose, authority was asserted, and every act of discrimination would be held accountable. Danielle moved among astonished eyes, calm yet commanding each breath, each gesture, each step a living lesson in power, justice, and authority, a moment no witness could forget, where truth triumphed fully over prejudice. The bank lobby remained tense and suffocating as Danielle Hayes, 38, stood tall, her eyes calm, yet piercing, watching every trembling action of Richard Coleman, every fearful gesture of the staff, every astonished and admiring glance of the customers, all overwhelmed by her silent power. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak, each moment becoming living proof of authority and justice. She inhaled deeply, moving slowly and deliberately, her brilliant orange dress blazing like a proud flame in the cold light of the lobby, her gaze fixed on every person, every wrongful act etched into her mind, and the bank system. Danielle pressed her phone, and the assistant's voice rang out clearly. Freeze all transactions. Suspend all personnel involved. Immediately, all false authority collapsed. Employee access cards turned red, system privileges were blocked, every act of discrimination, every offensive word recorded as irrefutable evidence, and all once arrogant staff became small, trembling, and powerless. Customers around the lobby fell silent, some trembling, some in awe, realizing they were witnessing true authority, where justice and truth were rising. Security officers Mark Dawson and Louise Harper, who had attempted to pull her aside, now stood frozen, sensing the overwhelming force, realizing they could not enforce control over power, born from resolve, calm, and meticulous preparation. Evan Walsh, 27 hands, shaking as he recorded every moment, recognized that Danielle's silence was a weapon more powerful than any shouting, while Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked mockingly, now stood frozen eyes wide with astonishment and awe, realizing that all prior prejudice and false authority had utterly collapsed. Danielle inhaled deeply, scanning the entire lobby, each prior action, and word of the staff and management exposed every surrounding sound, fading, leaving only her measured breath, every deliberate step, every piercing gaze, commanding silence, no one daring to move or resist. She walked slowly and deliberately, the light reflecting off her orange dress, transforming it into a symbol of authority, justice, and extraordinary calm. Every gesture recorded, every customer sensing the weight and decisiveness of her presence. Those who had mocked or belittled her now trembled powerless before authority. They could not comprehend, recognizing that every prejudice must be accounted for. Every prior misdeed would face consequence. Danielle pressed her phone again, and the assistant's voice rang out, "Document all misconduct. Log everything." Every employee, every guard, every prior wrongdoing became evidence. All false authority completely collapsed, and everyone in the lobby realized they were witnessing a permanent shift justice enforced in real time. Customers stood silent, some trembling, some admiring, understanding that true authority does not need shouting, does not need violent action, only preparation, resolve, and the ability to seize the moment. Danielle lifted her phone, eyes still locked on Richard Coleman, voice calm, yet sharp. This ends today. No more misconduct. No more prejudice. Every word, every gesture cut through all prior bias and false authority. Security staff and customers alike felt the power, Danielle's silence spreading like a flame, justice executed before their eyes. Every wrongful act, every insult exposed, every trembling gaze, every constricted breath, a witness to a woman who not only stood for herself, but established a new standard of authority and fairness. Danielle inhaled deeply, eyes scanning the lobby, stepping slowly, yet deliberately, emphasizing that true power does not come from title nor from shouting, but from preparation, steadfastness, and self-control. Every heartbeat, every glance, every breath in the lobby aligned with the authority and justice she commanded. Danielle moved like a storm, her bright orange dress a symbol of power, fairness, and truth. The bank lobby remained silent, every eye on her, every prior misdeed, collapsing as Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital, affirmed that justice, authority, and truth had triumphed completely. The bank lobby was now engulfed in thick silence as Danielle Hayes stood at its center, eyes calm, yet unwavering, her brilliant orange dress a living symbol of power and justice. Everyone around her remained still, trembling, realizing they were witnessing the complete collapse of prejudice and false authority. Richard Coleman, 45, the branch manager Hans, shaking face pale, saw every prior shout, every contemptuous gesture reduced to evidence of failure, all the false power he had relied on, utterly crushed by Danielle's silent strength. Every employee, every security guard, every customer felt the difference. Every gaze fixed on her, every heartbeat and breath aligned with the real power she emanated. Evan Walsh, 27, hands trembling as he held his phone, captured every moment, recognizing that Danielle's silence, every sharp glance, every composed gesture was a living testament, a historic lesson in authority, justice, and resolve. Bradley Moore, 42, who had once smirked mockingly, now stood frozen, eyes wide in awe and shock, realizing that all prior prejudice and false power had completely collapsed. Danielle inhaled deeply, stepping slowly and deliberately, eyes fixed on Richard Coleman, each step a declaration of authority, each breath proof of fairness, each piercing glance a verdict against all who had insulted or belittled her. Customers realized they were witnessing an unprecedented power struggle, where every act of discrimination was exposed, every insult recorded as evidence, and Danielle Hayes' true authority as CEO of Hayes Capital asserted completely. She paused in the center of the lobby, pressing her phone, and the assistant's voice rang out. Document all misconduct. Log everything. Every prior act of Richard Coleman, the security and staff was recorded, all false authority eliminated. Customers trembled and watched in awe, every heartbeat, every glance synchronized with Danielle's extraordinary calm and authority. The light reflected on her orange dress, turning her into a flame of power and justice in the center of the lobby. Each step, each gesture, each breath became a living lesson in the strength of resolve and fairness, as everyone witnessed the affirmation of true authority. Danielle Hayes, in her radiant orange dress, stepped through the bank lobby like an unstoppable storm, leaving behind the shattered remnants of prejudice and false power, imprinting a profound lesson in strength, calm, and the ability to transform an entire system through one person. Her movements resonated like the drumbeat of justice, embedding themselves into every gaze, every thought, every emotion of those witnessing the moment. A vivid symbol of the power to stand up, protect oneself, and effect real change, leaving a lasting impression that every employee, security guard, and customer in the bank would never forget. From the perspective of an expert in human behavior, organizational culture, and power in financial environments, Danielle Hayes' story is not just an isolated event, but a vivid demonstration of a truth many often avoid. True power does not come from titles or shouting, but from meticulous preparation, the ability to seize the moment, and the strength of resolve. Danielle proved that even a system that seems untouchable, dominated by prejudice and false authority, can be overturned through a silent yet weighted action, simply by maintaining calm confidence and clear strategy. The moment she stood in the center of the bank lobby, her bright orange dress a flame of authority, her gaze sharp yet composed, every action, every breath, every gesture became proof of power, justice, and truth, offering a profound lesson for every organization. When power is misused, when prejudice and discrimination persist, a system will collapse. If individuals dare to stand up, confront it, establish limits, and most importantly, act to assert fairness. This story also reminds us that justice does not always manifest through shouting, violent acts, or public spectacle, but often emerges in steadfast silence, through carefully considered decisions, and through the ability to wield authority to create impactful change without demonstration or display. Danielle used her silence, her resolve, and her strategy to record every wrongdoing, every insult, every discriminatory act, transforming them into living evidence, compelling the system to face reality and correct itself immediately. This serves as a lesson for every leader. Real change does not stem from policies, procedures, or speeches, but from standing tall, looking injustice squarely in the eye and acting to correct it. From an organizational management perspective, Danielle's actions not only dismantled the false authority of Richard Coleman and the staff, but also redefined power within financial environments where decisions can affect millions of dollars, where injustice can exist quietly hidden beneath the veneer of authority, and only when an individual dares to challenge and act at the right moment is the entire system forced to confront the truth. Danielle Hayes' journey also demonstrates the power of observation, documentation, and strategic action. She did not rely on fame, did not flaunt authority, and did not react emotionally, but used every action, every breath, every glance to exert pressure, transforming silence into a weapon that made those who had belittled her tremble and forced the system to acknowledge reality. This emphasizes that within any organization, from banks to hotels to global corporations, the potential for discrimination, contempt, and abuse of power always exists. And those who dare to stand up for fairness are the catalysts for true change, prompting entire systems to adjust and become more transparent. Danielle turned every act of discrimination, every offensive remark, every coercive gesture into undeniable evidence, showing that justice is not an abstract concept, but a practical force, and that power used correctly combined with resolve and strategy can change the entire structure of an organization. The story carries a profound message, for viewers' change does not come from anger or revenge, but from restraint, observation, calculation, and actions that create lasting impact. Danielle not only protected her own interests, but also safeguarded the dignity of all those who had ever been demeaned, judged by appearance, skin color, or social status, turning a personal moment into a lesson for society at large. From an organizational culture standpoint, this proves that no system, however powerful or long-standing, is immune. If power is placed in the hands of those lacking ethics, and individuals brave enough to confront injustice and act for truth become the ones who change the fate of the entire organization. It was Danielle's calm and composure in the face of pressure and contempt that created extraordinary strength, caused false authority to collapse, exposed prejudice, and made witnesses realize the value of resolve, fairness, and courage. This is also an inspirational message for audiences. Every person has the ability to create impact. Every small action at the right moment can change a system. And sometimes, one determined, courageous individual is enough to make justice, truth, and rightful authority rise. If this story resonates with you, press like to spread the message of fairness and power. Subscribe to continue following stories where truth always prevails, and comment the phrase "Stand up" to remind each other that sometimes a single person daring to act at the right moment is enough to change everything. Every moment matters, every action carries weight, and fairness is not an abstract concept, but a living reality manifested through courageous actions, steadfast resolve, and the ability to create change. Let Danielle Hayes' story remind you that power and justice go hand in hand, and that the strength of an individual brave enough to challenge prejudice can ripple outward, impacting not only themselves, but the entire organization and community, showing that silence, calm, and timely action are stronger than any shout, and that justice, authority, and truth exist, waiting for those courageous and determined enough to realize them, and that each of us can learn from Danielle Hayes how to stand, maintain dignity, wield power correctly, and inspire the next generation to transform a system, an organization, a society toward fairness, transparency, and humanity.